and become a little bit more victim-centered and more trauma-informed, and I think that's crucial, to prevent this. And that's a field that's, especially when it comes to patrol officers, that's majority dominated by men.
Yeah, I want to highlight somebody who's not present with us, but maybe one day she'll be on here, is Jill Tolles, who's a local assemblywoman in the Nevada state legislature, who got a bill passed recently that attacks the demand side of trafficking. And what it essentially does is it makes the penalties so severe for doing the jawing or the trafficking. I don't know, making up verbs here, but that Nevada's moving away from being a warm, hospitable place for this nefarious activity to happen to be so unpalatable that people don't want to come here anymore. So there's the demand side. If you punish so severely the perpetration of the crime, it de-incentivizes the likelihood that people are going to do it here. You guys are attacking the supply side, which is the human beings who are being trafficked, by informing and telling them that all is not lost if you break free, and we will help you, and there are resources for it. So I guess in conjunction, the two, if we're hitting both sides, we want to make Earth better by being a warm, welcoming place for people who are experiencing this type of victimhood to come out and get healing, right? And so when you mention the local government officials and that kind of thing, I think Jill needs to be acknowledged for her efforts, because it's a bold move to try to increase penalties for any sort of crime, but especially one that's as heinous as this, and the damage and the destruction are so long standing. I think, and the ripple effect is just gigantic.
Yeah, I think that's great. This is actually something else that we talked about in that last presentation we did, John and I. But I'm definitely thankful for legislation like that, because we've seen it work to great effect in other countries, specifically Nordic nations. I think Sweden was one of, if not the first, to set their laws from that angle of not just saying it's illegal to sell yourself as a prostitute or to sell other people as a trafficker. It's you'll get severely punished if you're the one caught buying, right. And putting the onus on the demand side of this supply-demand equation. And so that's been proven to be very successful. And that's one of those things that it has to start with the legislation, because then the enforcement can follow, and then you start to see results from that.
Yeah, and I think historically we've wanted to punish the prostitutes, right, if we're talking sex trafficking. And that's not fair if they've been unduly coerced into that environment. All you're doing is just compounding pain. It's like, well, you took somebody from a traumatic upbringing who was doing this behavior out of mere survival, and then now you're going to throw them in jail and give them a criminal record. That makes no sense. What we want to do is we want to heal. So another part of that legislation was to expunge records related to that, which is really great, because it's very liberating, and people can restore. This is restorative justice, right? We restore their lives and make them full participants in the society again. But if we only attack the people who are doing the bad deed on the supply side, then we miss the demand side, which is we got to go after those people and plug that hole.
Yeah, that's also doubly ineffective to punish the women, or in this case the prostitutes, or whoever may be the victims of this, because from the view of the traffickers, they're a product. The women are the product. And that'd be like, fighting drugs, it'd be like throwing the cocaine in jail. It's like you're kind of missing the point. You're attacking the symptom and not the source of the problem. So even from the supply side, that's the wrong direction to be going. And of course, it's always been illegal in most places to enslave people in one form or the other. But that's where the legislative and law enforcement focus needs to be, is getting to the person who is doing the trafficking, the one who is forcing these people into these situations, rather than punishing the people themselves for being forced into that position.
Let's talk about that. How do you find those people? Domestically, internationally? I mean,
how do you find
the traffickers? Like, it seems like a hydra. Like there's multiple heads, and I don't know if there's some international syndicate, that does this, or if it's, it's like, can you wipe out one boss and it takes out an entire network, or is it much more complicated than that because it's decentralized?
Yeah, it's a very complex. There's a lot of layers to it, and we've already kind of touched on it with the drugs, right? This kind of business really works hand in hand, right? Usually, for example, if you're transporting kilos of drugs, usually there's people involved with
that's
that,
trafficking.
right? Yeah, exactly. So drug dealers, pimps. This is also a very white collar crime enterprise as well. I know, for example, in my background, my studies, Canadian, so when up in Canada, a lot of the grunts that do all the work, all the foot soldiers are the bike gangs. I mean, the people who benefit from it are people that we don't recognize, lawyers, doctors, things like that. It's a very, the people that do it well, we don't see them because they do it well, right? They blend in very well with society, right? But the ones that you have to obviously work up the totem pole, for example, drug dealers, pimps, things like that. I think that's a great place to start because it's a hand-in-hand enterprise.
Yeah, and although I'll start by saying I'm no expert on the enforcement side, I've never, done an investigation into traffickers to bust a ring or whatever. But I do know that internationally speaking, one thing that Compassion First has had a lot of success with, in fact, one of the first things they realized they had to do when they got there was to work with the law enforcement and the judicial branch to make sure that they were doing this with integrity, because it's easy for it to infiltrate into those systems because there's a lot of money involved, like any criminal enterprise. And so when they were able to create the ability, the channel for law enforcement and for judges and prosecutors to be able to really tackle this problem free of corruption and be able to fight the corruption in their own ranks, that really changed the game for them. Because again, this is a risk for the traffickers because this is illegal and they'll get into big trouble for this. So it's basically a money game for them. If you make it if you make the risk of getting caught greater than the potential reward of the money, then they're not going to do it because it's a business. And
you're talking about in Indonesia when you guys went
that's
there,
right. That's right.
You had to change a whole culture of law enforcement.
Yeah, essentially, and we did that by bringing in experts in those fields from America to do training, to kind of help them learn how to tackle this problem from a more effective angle, and that really helped a lot. And so, there is some awesome guys in the regions that Compassion First works in the law enforcement, the district attorney's office, their version of that, throughout the whole judicial branch, and they've really done amazing work helping these girls that Compassion First tries to get off the streets. So that is a huge piece of this puzzle. Is when people like law enforcement get involved and start working to protect these people, totally changes the game.
How do you convince somebody who's so quick to sell their morality for a buck to go back the other direction? Like it seems like an impossible. Like there's an entrenched system there. If the money's so large, I'm thinking organized crime. Like in the 20s, people wind up dead if they don't fall into line. How do you encourage these people to set fear aside and do the proper terminations or whatever? You got to fire some people probably to get the whole system in line. It sounds like a huge heavy lift.
Yeah, it is. But that's no different than any other issue that corruption is rampant in, But I will say that, at least in Compassion First experience, we really met some truly amazing, especially law enforcement officers that this is the right thing to do. We want to do this. We know it's right. As we were talking about with the importance of masculinity in this issue, they realize this is our job. This is our passion as law enforcement officers, as men who want to keep our communities safe and to take down the people who are trying to hurt us. They were ready to go. They were willing to risk themselves. They were willing to risk their safety, their reputation, their careers. And there's a whole task force now in some of the regions where Compassion First works that are dedicated to this. And these guys are amazing. So I always tip my hat to law enforcement and the guys who are willing to put themselves on the line to protect these people and go up against, frankly, very dangerous traffickers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, if we bring this back home for a second, what can the average person do? I don't know, help the cause move forward. I'm in mental health. I'm hosting a podcast, right? We're expanding awareness. All right, cool. Let's pretend that all of the Reno Sparks area listens to this, and 400,000 people are now aware that this happens. Okay, awareness isn't enough. We need action. What's the action step?
I think the first one for sure is just know the signs, right? Of just someone who's just getting abused, right? That's the foundation for really everything. And then obviously when you go up the pyramid, when the end result, what it is victims of, human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, whatever it is, knowing the signs of what is abuse, right? The second step, I think, is knowing where to, send people for help. That's more from a provider standpoint and knowing what agencies do what and what agencies can provide what for some people. But just knowing just the basic knowledge of who can help you out is huge. And then when you get to that point, that's where providers kind of step in, and that's where we kind of get to partake in the healing process. And then knowing just how to have conversations and how to, motivate and empower these victims that there is a life outside of this. And I think that's a very crucial part, and that can be a lot of make or break for a lot of people, because if we don't do that right as providers, then they're just going to go back.
Yeah, and I would say, this isn't an issue, obviously, as you mentioned, where you can take the family out and volunteer on the weekends to do this.
Right, that's kind of what I'm asking.
Right.
Yeah,
so you can, like John said, it may not seem as glamorous, or you might not get a T-shirt from it, from doing the fun run. But understand that this is, like I said earlier, something that went underground, so it's not going to be obvious. There's not going to be, a office in a business park that says, Peter and Sons trafficking industry, where you can go and protest or whatever like that. It's hidden, and it's hidden because that's how they've gotten success, and that's how they've been able to thrive. So look for the signs, educate yourself, know what to look for, and don't be afraid to stand up to it. These are cowards doing this. And so, whether it's informing law enforcement or getting involved with whatever organization in your area is dealing with this, because I guarantee there's one out there. So if you don't know of an organization in your region, go do a Google search and there'll be one around. There's a lot of people doing this. It's good work. But you can definitely donate to whatever organization, because that's the big thing right now. For nonprofits, they need donations, because again, this is a fairly new problem in our society. Again, not that it's new, it's happening, but the awareness is new. People are just getting into how to really fight this effectively, and that costs dollars. So I would say find someone you like, be it in the local level, be the national level, the international level, like Compassion First, and get involved with them, donating, going to their events, volunteering, getting the word out. It's really a great way to do that, because you have to be specialized to really make a big difference in the physical actions of this. And most people don't have those skills or training, but you can give the money to allow them to do their work.
Who are the people that you've been training? You guys together? School? Oh, we heard medical professionals, law enforcement. What else? Schools, maybe?
So medical professionals. So, for example, people that work in an ER setting, medical doctors, nurses, things like that. We've done presentations in schools for high schools. We've talked to government. We are starting to work with law enforcement. The biggest one right now that I'm starting to do in Denver, starting in February, is nightlife. And especially in the hospitality industry, it's huge. So what I'll be working on now is policy and procedures in nightclubs, in restaurants, in bars, about trying to prevent not only human trafficking, but sexual assault and domestic violence from occurring in the workplace.
So we're not talking about like the casinos downtown aren't hiring people and trafficking them. But what may be happening is that the people they're hiring are being trafficked by someone else. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Exactly what you're hearing.
Okay, so if you're in one of those industries, it may behoove you to reach out to these guys and say, hey, I want to learn more. Yeah. So maybe if you're a nurse in an outpatient clinic, an urgent care or something, and you're like, oh, this that sounds like a patient I just saw like 2 weeks ago. Some of these signs that you're talking about, like shifty eyes and uncomfortable, and they came in with somebody who didn't look to be they called them partner, significant other, but they didn't look like there was a lot of love between them, that kind of thing. You go, ooh, I think I need to get more hip to this. You can reach out to your local agency or contact these guys, at their agencies and get some specified training. Right, we can do that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Teachers and school counselors, I'm guessing too, for like you said, the high school level, because that's probably the more apt place for kids who are maybe, on a wayward path, credit deficient, maybe in the system of some sort. They may be likely to be victims, and we want to look out for that. What else? Hospitality is a good one. You mentioned that.
Yeah, pretty much any industry where you're dealing with a